morning, afternoon and evening. I'm Stephen Skripek, based in the UK, and welcome to TRG 30, our weekly virtual roundtable series. As you get comfortable for yet another Zoom experience, I'd like to remind you that you will all receive an email with a copy of today's roundtable presentation and video. The Q&A button is the place to go if you have questions today. As always, I'm joined by TRG's CEO, Jill Robinson, who's here from hopefully as sunny as it is in Suffolk, Colorado. Hello, Jill.
Hi, Stephen.
I want to assure you that TRG will continue to address and anticipate current needs in the field and bring them to TRG 30. But now more than ever, we're focusing on the last bit, a revolution for evolution, to ensure that the arts and culture field finds resiliency in the wake of COVID-19, which brings us to our guest today, Zannie Voss. Zannie is the director of the National Center for Arts Research, as well as chair and professor of arts management and arts entrepreneurship at Southern Methodist University. Welcome, Zannie. Thank you for being here. We've invited Zannie today because she and Jill have co-authored a US data-driven report about COVID-19's impact on the field called In It for the Long Haul. That was published on Monday, and as it's hot off the press, we're here today to dive in. Now, if you're not in the US, this is not your cue to leave. I know we have people all over the globe joining us today, although if it's in the middle of the night, I question your choices. But the findings here and the recommendations that Zannie and Jill have really are relevant regardless of your location. Jill, I'll turn this over to you to walk us through some key points, and then I'll be back for questions from me and critically from our audience today. Jill.
Thank you, Stephen. Zannie, thank you. Not only is she all of those things, she is my friend. I'm glad to be joined by you today. And before we get to the report, as a bit of just context for the conversation and for all of us, data is a big part of the conversation today. And there are three types of data that we look at when we look at the field and the results and activities. The first one relates directly to you. That's individual organization data. You in this virtual room have reports, you have conversations, you have focus groups, you have all kinds of data that is specific to your organization. The second that we'll come back to is benchmarked data. And as you know, we have implemented or started a project to benchmark data in the context of COVID-19. And finally, aggregated data. Zannie, that is, among many things, your specialty at SMU DataArts. Can you provide a little bit of context about that and how we used and you used that aggregated data to inform the report that we did?
Sure. Thank you, Jill. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We look at the fact that arts and cultural organizations don't exist in a vacuum, they exist in communities. So we try to take data on arts and cultural organizations from our own cultural data profile at SMU DataArts, but also from IRS 990s and partners with Legal American Orchestras and TCG. And we locate every arts organization within the US and then wrap into it the Census Bureau data, so we can see who lives nearby, what other businesses operate nearby. TRG arts data helps us to understand arts consumption in markets, public funding data, all of it to say, what's the extent to which the community's characteristics and arts consumption patterns have an impact on what you would expect of an arts organization's performance. So it's all about context and looking at the larger arts and culture ecosystem.
That's been one of the great pleasures and joys of our partnership, is enabling an organization like yours to take the aggregated consumption data that we have and enliven it and tell stories about it. And so this, in fact, report is one of those stories at a very particular time, isn't it, Zannie?
It is. So from our different vantage points and the complementary ways that we look at data, both TRG and SMU DataArts exist to help arts and cultural leaders overcome challenges and increase impact. We do that using data and the knowledge generated from it in both of our organizations. So at the start of the pandemic, there was really a body blow that took everyone's breath away. And we understand it demanded concentrated attention on the short-term triage. Our thoughts turn to those who are starting to catch their breath, who have the bandwidth to think beyond near-term survival and start to contemplate the organization's path forward. So as a first step, we took stock of potential financial impact in the longer term. We said, let's stretch from what has been incurred to date and push that out to a 12-month horizon. To do this, we created estimates that adjust aggregated annual data on the field using COVID-19 survey responses about decisions made and losses incurred to date by member organizations of Theater Communications Group, League of American Orchestras, Association of Art Museum Directors, Association of Performing Arts Professionals, Chamber Music American, International Association of Black Bands, and First Peoples Fund. And I say this because we are grateful to all of these organizations for sharing their survey findings with us, and to the Mellon Foundation, which helped to facilitate the coordination of access to the surveys. Based on these estimates, we came up with the estimate that the aggregate net loss to the field of nonprofit arts and cultural organizations will be $6.8 billion. That's built on a $12.4 billion loss of revenue, offset with a $5.5 billion net expense reduction. So if you boil it down on a per organization basis, it translates to an average deficit equivalent to about 26% of budget, which is a reasonable and somewhat conservative estimate. We realize that all of this is contingent on future decisions. But the exercise was really a starting place to get, number one, arts and cultural leaders and board members in a frame of mind to start asking a first critical question of what might the next year look like for our organization. It's also, though, a starting place for everyone who supports and values arts and culture in their communities so that they have a clear-eyed view of financial realities. This can help to inform individual donors, foundations, city councils, government agencies, corporations, as they create their own strategies for ensuring that the arts and cultural organizations that make their community vibrant places to live actually end up reopening.
So this pivot from just from acknowledging the depth of the impact on a continuum, as you've acknowledged, but also moving to now what and how do we ensure is a big focus and desire around the benchmark data that I reminded us about a moment ago. If you haven't participated, or if this concept or idea is new to you, TRG, in partnership with Coventry, England-based Purple 7, has launched and initiated a free benchmarking tool, free to every organization that participates, with the desire of creating a resource for near real-time look at an important part of the relationship between community and arts and culture, and that is related to arts consumption, cultural consumption, and being able to gain insight from that, that near real-time data, enable that data to be used as we understand the depth of the crisis and the impact across a global marketplace. And that data can be used, we're seeing already, for lobbying at the city, provincial, national level. And finally, and importantly, modeling so that we can think about, so that we can act on future invitations for reconnection, act on and achieve the results that help us recover. So this resource is available to all of you and is every day being updated with new types of reporting tools that deliver those insights. This is the most recent one that enables organizations who participate to look at activity this year on a revenue and admission basis, month by month, compared to last year. This idea, though, around action is in fact what we together moved to in the most sort of word-wise, substantive part of the report to say, how would we orient the field's thinking toward action? Zannie, there were 3 major propositions that we organized that work around that you brought to the table. I'll love you to describe those.
Sure. So these 3 propositions, it's from 2 authors, Kim and Melbourne, from their 2009 Harvard Business Review article. These are propositions that any organization can develop and align in order to achieve success. We could see that this framework made intuitive sense to the field as a way to think about how to organize thinking when facing this crisis. So the 3 propositions, the value proposition, it's what are the set of benefits that exceed costs that are meaningful to some set of individuals. And this is a utility that those who are served perceive about an offering that exceeds the price they're willing to pay for it, as well as non-monetary costs. Or it's a utility that those who support the organization see in provision of the services to a community. The second is a revenue proposition. If we were for-profits, this would be the profit proposition. The revenue proposition is the thing that enables the organization to generate enough sustainable revenue out of the value proposition for some set of stakeholders. It's kind of the answer to the question of what drives revenue. And third, the people proposition. It has to motivate and enable that those who are working for and with the company to successfully carry out the value and revenue propositions. So, thinking about those 3 big propositions is a way that any organization can start thinking about how to move forward.
And as we talked about, and we're developing the content for the paper, these propositions in our consulting and TRG experience made immediate and intuitive, of course, sense to be the lens through which the conversation would happen. And it resulted in 4 focusing questions in the report that we would offer now to all of you who are participating and listening, be focusing questions as you think about your recovery. The first is, what is the source of our strength? This question is often referred to as mission. I'm not sure that goes deep enough. Our mission statements can be polite and tidy. And now is the time to be thinking deeply, we propose, about the way that we will serve and connect in meaningful ways with our community. How do we do that? What is the strength that we bring to that table? The second is revenue. It is critical over the next 12 to 18 months that we build revenue models, and they are likely to look different than they did pre-COVID. Whether it is new foundation support for a digital program or a futures program for subscribers or members, being able to describe, activate on, and plan for managing revenue is a critical part of the discovery during recovery. The third is our people. Data doesn't do, people do. And this we're finding to be an incredible opportunity for positive disruption. I referenced Gillian Tett's book, The Silo Effect. This is the time when we hear bold leaders pulling scrums of people together based on their experiences and their skills, not their current job descriptions as necessarily. So inspiring people to behave and contribute toward recovery, it's taking lots of creative shapes and forms. And finally, when our doors open, with whom will we gather? We all know various ones of us have different kinds of core audiences, but you know who they are. When you recover, when you return, will that be the only people? Will that be the only part of your community with whom you will gather or not? Zannie and I contend that, in fact, this is the time to lean in hard to the questions of diversity and inclusion and ensure that when we do return, we're gathering with people that we will be inspired by, that we can inspire on a broad basis. Zannie, I'll love for you just to say another thought or two before we take questions.
You know, these questions are critical, vital for organizations to consider in order to not only weather the current storm, but to grow through the crisis. You know, answering these questions for any organizations requires a lot of internal conversation, a lot of buy-in around reimagining, resilience, adaptability. I think about the Jamil Olawale Kasako quote that's in our paper. It's about creating futures and inviting people into them. And there are really clear practical steps that any organization can take to move forward. This road to endurance begins with a return to basics in many ways. You know, having a clear sense of meaning, of relevance, of purpose to your community. You know, the question of what will you do to improve your community will say a lot for who you are when your doors reopen.
Yeah. So our intention today is to have time to talk with you, and for Zannie and I to be able to engage with you directly related to the themes we've advanced here and some of the practical realities that you are facing. Stephen, you've joined us to help facilitate that conversation. I welcome you back, and take us away.
Sure. Don't forget, if you want to submit your questions, the Q&A button is the place to go. And thank you. I know Caitlin and Jenny are working diligently behind the scenes to look through those and check through those. But I have a couple of questions inspired from the report and from your discussion so far. I just wonder, as you were looking through the data here and collaborating, what surprised you?
Zannie, you can go.
What surprised me, it was really interesting to see the variations in how the crisis was being lived by different arts and cultural sectors, depending on operating model. You know, for those that had a season of programming during the summer, clearly they were going to be hit hard, versus those that hadn't planned to have any summer programming and really just had a kind of September through May season. You know, looking at those differentials, and in every case, it was also in the comments, the open comments in the questions that were, yes, there was uncertainty everywhere, but profound concern for people, for artists, for employees, for audiences, for donors, that sense of dedication. I wasn't surprised by it, but I was certainly moved by it.
My answer is the pace of change. As we wrote this report, it took us weeks to put it together, and boy, oh boy, during this period, things, as we in this virtual room know, change not just week to week, but sometimes day to day. And so as we published the report and we were deep in it, and we hit final PDF version, I found myself saying, wow, pretty like tomorrow, this is going to be dated. And yet, in this virtual room, there are organizations across the spectrum of thinking and down the path at different levels. And so I think and know that this will apply to them, to all of us too, in different ways at different times, but the pace of change for sure.
So I wonder if the data has given you an insight into, I mean, it's a provocative ask, but the survival rate of cultural organizations, I mean, can we imagine that from the data?
We don't have a crystal ball to say X% of organizations will close. There was an article recently that by UNESCO in International Council of Museums that estimates that worldwide, 1 in 8 museums may close. You know, that seems pretty sobering and a loss. And yet those kinds of realistic expectations and estimates help us all to start thinking about, okay, and for those who survive, what is it that they can do differently? You know, what is it about them that will help them to see a clear path forward?
I wonder, Jill, that it's a great question to pose of the organizations that survive or even thrive, right? There's opportunity to thrive. There is opportunity.
Yeah.
I wonder what characteristics those organizations will have in common.
I can think of 3 right now. One that I know Zannie will agree with is the amount of working capital prior to the crisis. And what we know from the last recession, what we know from Zannie's good work with Teresa Eyring, and our own experience is that the resources that we have on our balance sheet prior to a crisis help us weather it better. So that's number one, and should, I think, be on all organizations' mind related to recovery. The second is investment in revenue. We must maintain revenue over this period of time to enable recovery. And so investment in marketing, in philanthropy, in the revenue streams that will fuel. That could be government, that could be sponsors, could be foundations, but investment in income, I'd say, is number two. And number three, I'm just tripping on right now, but it's about leadership belief, and I dare say joy in being able to imagine something different and almost inevitably smaller. Being able to find joy in what we will be. Smaller is better than gone. And being able to find joy in that new version and optimize it for our communities, that belief and sense of optimism, I'm confident is among those variables too.
Yeah, and Jill, actually, I think about the almost 100 leaders we've spoken to at the Executive Recovery Summits. We're seeing that,
yeah,
and that evolution as we go through. Okay, lots of questions. Thank you, Aaron. Is there data around the public's willingness to regather?
There are a variety of studies that are ongoing that do ask questions about intent to visit. I know that Steve Schiller in Washington has been conducting this, Colleen Dillon Schneider's Know Your Own Bone, these kind of ongoing comparisons to last year this time, looking at will someone attend in a week, a month, 3 months. So those who are interested, you'll see in the paper there are references to some of those studies to take a look on a regular basis. It's broken out also by geography and by kind of operating model, if it's outdoors, indoors, if people can move around, if they can't move around. So there's some good resources out there.
We have the real-time nature of the COVID-19 sector benchmark has in its vision the idea of being able to regularly gauge intent to return so that we have more real-time evaluation. That, among many other things, are in the docket for recovery. So excellent work being done by really great researchers, and more to come.
And the beauty of it is you can talk about intent, and then through TRG's data, you can actually see, did they live up to that? Did they do what they intended to do?
Right.
Doug, thank you for your question. Given the pace of change, how far ahead can we really look? Do we need to be really bold in examining our mission and the means by which we deliver on it?
Yes, Doug. Yes, I'll take a stab, Zannie, to say in conversations that we're having, we're saying let's look out over 12 to 18 months and let's not crazy model. Let's not necessarily, we don't need to have a model every month over that 12 to 18 months, but let's imagine several, and let's bring the best, including our artistic leaders, together to be thinking about how we the questions that we asked. Whom will we regather with? What are the revenue streams? What is our service? Why? I think yes is the unequivocal answer, Doug.
Yeah, I come back to, in the paper we say, what do you have? What do you do? What do you know? Thinking about, given your mission, if you had 10 different ways that it could be manifest and lived, what are the different ways? And what is the scenario planning that you can start to engage in? And what will be most meaningful to your community? Because who you show up as coming out of this and during the crisis, this is a more important time than ever about providing meaning. Yeah. And it's up to each organization to figure out how does that translate given their community's needs.
Zannie, I'm going to come back to the point you made about what surprised you in the report, particularly around people. And Sarah's posed a question here about, and asked, can you talk about inspiring people in the midst of layoffs and furloughs? I agree, it's super important, but more challenging now. And I think about the people that are joining us today and what they might be facing personally, or their organizations might be facing. I wonder what maybe Jill, first, what you might say to that.
Well, this is the time as a leader to take care of yourself so that your cup is full, so to speak. But this goes back to this orientation of joy in the new, and being able to see opportunity. And that is a seminar in and of itself, I think. Zannie, I'd love your thoughts, but our Recovery Summit conversations are really geared around this. What else would you say, Zannie?
I would say that putting out this idea of being positive, of finding a positive energy moving forward, is not at all intended to be a callousness about the real pain and suffering and difficulty and hardship that are being incurred by human beings as part of this process. But if we dwell consistently only on that pain, we won't be able to move forward. Right. And so figuring out, where does the resiliency come from? If chaos is the new normal, then how do we adapt to dealing with chaos? Either we give up, or we say the only path forward is through being positive and starting to have a plan and a vision for what that might look like.
A question here that talks about how do senior leaders discuss the economic necessity of not presenting versus perception of not continuing our mission? Some aren't getting that not presenting is the best way for us to sustain our mission into the future.
There are lots of conversations that we're having right now about, I think, this very specific thing. Yesterday, with a theater company where the artistic team felt like, if we're not producing or presenting, then we're not us. And the challenge that I'd offer is engaging artistic leaders with other key stakeholders to imagine how we use all of the strengths at our resources to serve our communities differently, but that's no less service. And I'm really, really interested in how the field will create creativity and new ways that some of it might be temporary, but some of it might be permanently new ways that we're serving and being creative.
And just to pick up on that point, Jill, I think of it, the difference between, if we're not doing the thing we want to do, then we're not living up to mission. But mission lives in how you serve your community. Have you improved lives? And as long as you're doing that, there's an enormous amount of relevance. You may not be doing it in the way that you would like to be doing it, or that you have historically done it, but being able to provide aesthetic experiences that elevate someone's spirit during this point in time, being able to educate, right, being able to share, a sense of history, artistry, intelligence, can be incredibly meaningful to people, particularly now. That's mission fulfillment too.
Yep. Jill, I wonder if we might close a final question of a theme that I've seen here, which talks about rebuilding earned revenue. And I think back to the report, and actually, Jill, your reference to core audiences, as you were speaking earlier on, those that have a base of repeat customers and funders have greater odds of not only surviving, but reviving. But what about in a place where earned revenue is so significant, important, where there's perhaps even in the UK, right, there's little subscription, philanthropic giving is nowhere near the US. What would you say to those organizations around how rebuilding earned revenue, how we can light a fire under that as we move forward?
I would say the same. Even though there's not a subscription model, there are loyalists within a database, and segmenting so that we understand and are ensuring that the lion's share of patrons who have been attending continue to find a way to connect, ideally in a way that has them investing so that they continue to feel that tether, so that they don't get out of, so that we maintain the relationship and the investment, but also segmenting so that we're attracting and seeking to attract new patrons in the right ways. That too is a longer conversation, but it is possible, I believe, to make to happen.
Zannie, thank you so much for joining us. And Jill, for everyone joining today, don't forget you will get a copy of today's presentation after the session. We'll be sending that through to you tomorrow. Your feedback is crucial as well. We read every comment, and yes, we do talk internally about how that will help us grow and serve you better as we progress through TRG 30. Jill, do you want to talk briefly about what we've got coming up over the next few weeks?
We have a combination of guests like the, thank you, Zannie, for participating today, like the excellent and so thoughtful Zannie Voss, and others from adjacent industries, from foundations, from authors who are going to help us think about how we pull up a bit and manage through. And we will also be talking about some of the things that you must do, the strategies you must be considering, like earned revenue and how to maximize it, like new funding streams and pricing. So more of that to come. And in the interim, Stephen, I know that the TRG 30 network is a way for people, so many questions I saw being asked today.
Yes, yeah, lots of questions there, and we will take those, answer them on our TRG 30 virtual network, and look forward to seeing you all next week. Jill, Zannie, thank you very much.
Thank you, Zannie.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.